Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Suraj. So in continuation with the video lectures on ECG, in this part the most important topic we'll be covering, which is myocardial infarction and heart blocks. So let's start. So in myocardial infarction or ischemia, so ischemia is when there is decrease in the perfusion to the cell, and infarction is the cellular response to a decrease in oxygen supply to the cell. So MI is broadly divided into two types, that is ST segment elevation MI, so ST segment elevation MI or STEMI, and non-ST segment elevation MI. So this is important because the management varies with these two. So in ST segment elevation MI, the predominant modality of treatment would be invasive, where you do a percutaneous coronary angioplasty, and in non-ST segment elevation MI, the treatment would be, you would first do a diagnostic angiogram, and then you would decide whether you want to do a revascularization or no. So in myocardial infarction, the main ECG change which is seen is ST segment elevation. So the main thing which is seen is ST segment elevation. So now let's learn why there is ST segment elevation and what are the other changes in ECG which is seen in MI. So as you all know, normally the ST segment is isoelectric. That means normally it is in the baseline. Why is it in the baseline? Because all the sum total of electrical vectors in that time period is 0. So ST segment is isoelectric. So now let's see what happens to the cell during ischemia. So whenever there is ischemia, the main pathological process that happens is potassium ion leakage. So there is potassium ion leakage. So this leads to a series of events which leads to the ECG changes. So the first thing that happens because of potassium ion leakage is there is reduced resting membrane potential of the cell. So because of potassium ion leakage, there is reduced resting membrane potential. The second thing that happens is shorter duration of action potential. Because of potassium ion leakage, there is shorter duration of action potential. The third thing that happens is decrease in the amplitude of action potential. So all these three, let us see in this picture here. As you can see, the black line here shows the normal action potential of a cardiac muscle fiber, and the line in blue here shows the action potential in a cell with ischemia. So the first thing is there is a decrease in action potential. So say this is minus 90 millivolts, so this would be around minus 70 millivolts. So there is decrease in resting membrane potential. The second thing that happens is there is decrease in the duration of action potential. So this is the normal duration of action potential. In a cell with ischemia, there is decrease in duration of action potential. The third thing that happens is decrease in the amplitude. So this is the normal, and this is the cell with ischemia. There is decrease in amplitude of action potential. So because of all these, there are certain changes which happens in a cell with in the ECG. So first, let's look at how those changes occurs. So to explain these changes in ECG in MI, two theories have been put forth. So two theories were put forth. So one is known as the diastolic injury current theory or hypothesis, and the second is known as systolic injury current hypothesis. So these two theories were put forth to tell why there was ST segment elevation in MI. So let's look at each theory. So in the first theory, which is diastolic current injury hypothesis, the main thing you have to remember is normally there is normal depolarization followed by repolarization. So but whereas in a cell with ischemia, it is partly depolarized. That means the amplitude doesn't reach till the normal, it is partly depolarized. So there is less amount of positive charge compared to a normal cell. So say there are 3 plus during normal cell because of depolarization. When it's partly depolarized, there's a less amount of positive charge. So this causes a current to be generated from the ischemic region towards the normal region. So say this is the cardiac muscle, ischemia has occurred here. Because of this, there's an injury current. This is an important term to remember. Injury current, which is generated from the ischemic region towards the normal region. So when this injury current is generated, this injury current moves away from electrode. So this moves away from the electrode. So this is seen as QT depression. So why is it depressed? Because it's moving away from the electrode. The current is moving away from the electrode, so there's QT depression. So when this QT depression is seen, there is something known as an AC coupler within the ECG instrument. So this AC coupler is what maintains the calibration of the ECG instrument. So whenever there's this QT depression, this AC coupler tries to compensate, and then it prints the ECG wave showing a compensatory ST elevation. So what happens here is, so this is a QT depression here. So primarily there's a QT depression here. When this goes into the ECG machine, because of something known as the AC coupler, it produces a compensatory ST elevation here. So this is a XT elevation, this is a QRS wave, ST elevation, and a T wave. So this ST elevation is seen as a compensatory feature because of QT depression. QT depression occurs because of injury current moving away from the ischemic region. So this is the first theory, diastolic current injury hypothesis. So coming to the second theory, which is systolic injury current hypothesis. So this is a more straightforward theory compared to diastolic theory. This was given much later in diastolic theory. So in this, it says that in a normal cell, there is a normal depolarization which occurs, but in an ischemic cell, it is incompletely depolarized. So it's similar to the previous theory, it is incompletely depolarized. Because it is incompletely depolarized, it gets repolarized faster than the normal cell. So because it is partly depolarized, it gets repolarized faster than the normal cell. So when the normal cell is still getting repolarized, the ischemic cell would already have got repolarized. As you can see here, by the time the normal cell gets repolarized, the ischemic cell is already got repolarized. So this leads to more positivity on the ischemic cell. So there's an injury current moving towards the ischemic cell. So in this theory, the injury current moves towards the ischemic cell. So what does this cause? This causes a primary ST elevation on the ECG. Primary ST elevation. This primary ST elevation is also accompanied by a hyperacute T wave. Hyperacute T wave. So this theory is much more easier to understand. So ischemic cell gets repolarized faster. So there's an injury current towards the ischemic region leading to primary ST elevation with hyperacute T wave. So before looking at the ECG, we'll see about two types of injury which can occur with MI. So it can be a subendocardial injury, or it can be a transmural injury. So in a subendocardial injury, only a part of the endocardium is involved. So in subendocardial injury, only this part gets involved. So when this occurs, there is injury current which moves like this. So what does this show on the ECG? It shows a depression, ST depression. When there is transmural infarction here, what happens? The electric current, injury currents move in this direction because there's a whole wall is affected. So this leads to ST segment elevation, ST elevation. So this is the basics. So now let's look at the ECG. I won't repeat how we read the ECG, which I've already explained in the previous videos. So let's look at this ECG. As you can see, there is. So we'll start looking at the morphology of QRS complex and ST segment and T wave. So what is striking here is T waves are tall. So there's peak T waves. So this is known as hyperacute T waves. Known as hyperacute T waves, which is characteristic of MI, hyperacute T waves. And the next thing is there is ST elevation. So where is the ST elevation? You can see here there is slight. So this is the baseline. So this is the baseline, and here there is slight ST elevation. Here you can see it's more pronounced. ST elevation is very clearly seen here. There's ST elevation. Again, there's ST elevation. Here again you can see there's ST elevation and hyperacute T waves. So ST elevation with hyperacute T waves is MI. ST elevation and hyperacute T waves. So now we'll learn about localization of MI. So as you all know, heart is not a simple structure. There are many coronary arteries, the right, left, the circumflex, the anterior descending, and the marginal arteries. So all this supply a different part of the cardiac muscle. So we should localize which part of the heart is affected because of ischemia, so that we'll know which artery could be blocked and so forth. So this is a diagram which depicts where you can, so depicting the localization of lesions in MI. As you can see here, anterior and septal infarction can be seen in the precordial leads because it is right next to that. So V1, V2, V3 and V4 can V1, V2, V3 and V4 can find anteroseptal infarcts. Anteroseptal infarcts in V1, V2, V3 and V4. In V5 and V6 you can find lateral infarcts. So you can find lateral infarcts. This lateral infarct can also be seen in lead 1 because lead 1 is also positioned from the two upper limbs. So lead 1 is also for lateral infarct. Now for inferior wall MI, it is seen in the limb leads. So it is seen in lead 2, lead 3 and AVF. So inferior wall MI is seen in lead 2, lead 3 and AVF. So any changes in these leads, you can tell that you can localize the lesion of MI. So this is very important. So please make a note of this. So now we'll look at the natural course of progression of ECG changes in MI. So as you all know, this is the normal ECG, the normal QRS complex with a T wave. So this is normal. And now in few minutes, the first change which is seen is hyperacute T wave. Hyperacute T wave. As you can see, the T wave is peaked. So hyperacute T waves. And then later on, after a few minutes, 2 hours, you can see that the ST segment is slowly getting elevated. So ST segment elevation is seen. In hours to days, it gets more pronounced. Again, ST segment elevation is seen. And then once it gets healed, and then once the cell gets accustomed to this injury, and then it starts its own process mechanisms of repair. After a few months, this is what you see. So here, what is the difference between a post-MI ECG with a normal ECG? Here there is pronounced Q wave. So as you can see here, this Q wave is more. So there is pronounced Q wave in a post MI ECG compared to a normal ECG. So this is what you have to know. So now coming to the variants of the other changes which can be seen in ECG. So the first thing is there are certain QRS changes which are seen. QRS changes. So the first QRS change which is seen is decrease in R wave. So all these changes are in MI. So these QRS changes in MI, the first thing is decrease in R wave. The second thing is decrease in Q wave in anterior, lateral and inferior leads. So this is the second change seen, decreased Q wave in anterior, lateral and inferior leads. And the next thing which you can see is, especially in a posterior infarct, what you can see is increase R amplitude in V1 to V2. So in a posterior wall infarct, what you can see is increase in R amplitude in V1 to V2. So now coming to the variants. So the first thing is Prinzmetal angina. So Prinzmetal angina, there is no complete block, but there's just a transient deprivation in the oxygen supply. So what you can see is, you can see a transient ST elevation. In Prinzmetal angina, there is transient ST elevation along with ST T wave alternance pattern. So just remember this, there is transient ST elevation which reverts back to normal, and there is ST T wave alternance. That is, there can be transient ST depression and followed by the opposite of that. So that's what alternance pattern means. So this is seen quite rare, and so any patient comes with chest pain, and if we find ST elevation, it need not always be MI, it can be Prinzmetal angina also, where there is only transient ST elevation. And now coming to one more important topic, something known as pseudo normalization. So if a patient has history of MI, say he had history of MI, say he had MI 5 years back, so there could be a slight ST depression as a baseline ECG for that person, because there's a history of MI in the past. So his baseline ECG itself would have a slight ST depression. Now he gets another attack of MI. When this happens, there is ST elevation which occurs, but his baseline ST segment itself is depressed. So when he gets another attack of MI, he could have a normal ST segment. So it could be an isoelectric ST segment. So this is called pseudo normalization. So this you have to remember, because if there's any history of MI, it is important to see the previous ECG and then comment on the current ECG. So before we come to heart blocks, there is one more important topic which we'll learn. And now in a minute or two, we'll discuss about MI changes superimposed in a patient with bundle branch block. So this becomes quite tricky. So let's revise in a few seconds. So in RBBB, what are the changes seen in ECG? As I told before, you find RSR pattern or the M pattern in V1 and V2. So in LBBB, you find a broad and notched R in 1 AVL, V5 and V6. So this here becomes tricky when the patient has LBBB with MI. So when a patient comes with LBBB with MI, the MI changes are not that pronounced. So So it's important to know how to diagnose a patient who has LBBB and has come with MI. So let's look at an ECG. So let's look at this ECG here. So this ECG here, you can see that the QRS is wide. So QRS is wide, more than 120 milliseconds, and R is broad and notched. So R wave here is broad and notched. R wave is broad. As you can see here, the R wave is broad and notched here. The R wave is broad, notched. So this indicates that this is LBBB. Now LBBB findings can, when you superimpose these findings with MI, it becomes difficult to find out that it is MI. So there was a criteria put forth. So you should remember this criteria, the name at least, called Garbosa criteria. So this criteria was put forth to diagnose MI with LBBB. So this criteria is very easy. The first point is more than one lead showing more than 1 mm of concordant ST elevation. The second thing is more than one lead in V1 to 3 showing more than 1 mm of concordant ST depression. And the third is the ST elevation should be more than or equal to 25% of the preceding S wave. So this is very easy to see. And now we'll look at this ECG. As you can see in this ECG, let's look at V2 because it's clearly seen here. So this is the QRS complex, this is a T wave, and this is ST segment. So here ST segment is depressed. So this ST segment depression is more than 1 mm. So there's more than 1 mm of concordant ST segment depression. So this indicates that 0.2 of Garbosa criteria is positive. So that indicates that this patient has MI with LBBB. So this becomes important. And I remember when I was in internship, one case in the casualty during the night I had seen where patient had LBBB and MI. So it becomes quite tricky to diagnose MI with a patient with LBBB just by an ECG. So that's why this criteria was put forth. So now, so that was about MI. So now we'll discuss about heart blocks. So in heart blocks, what you have to remember is there are 3 types. It could be an SA node block, it could be an AV node block, or it could be a infra-Hessian block. That means below the bundle of His block. So if it's an SA node block, usually the patient doesn't present with any symptoms, or they could have pre-syncope like symptoms. AV node is the most important because that is where patient presents with characteristic ECG findings and symptoms. Infra-Hessian block is again of 2 types. It could be a left fascicular block or a right fascicular block. So we won't discuss that now. We'll discuss mainly the AV blocks. So AV blocks you could classify based on ECG into 2 types. It could be a constant PR interval heart block, or it could be a variable PR interval heart block. In a constant PR interval heart block, there is first degree heart block and second degree type 2 heart block. In variable PR interval heart block, there is first degree type 2 heart block, second degree type 1 heart block, which is Mobitz type 1, and third degree heart block. So if you see broadly, AV blocks divided into first degree, second degree is 2 types, Mobitz 1 and Mobitz type 2, and there is third degree. So third degree is a complete heart block. So let's look at the ECG. So this is a first degree heart block. This is a first degree heart block. In first degree heart block, the important finding is increase in PR interval. So the important finding is increase in PR interval in first degree heart block. So PR interval is more than 200 milliseconds. As you can see here, PR interval, so this is a P wave, this is a QRS, so PR interval is high. So that is first degree heart block. So coming to second degree heart block, So this is second degree type 1. So that is Mobitz type 1. So in Mobitz type 1 there is progressive lengthening of P wave, PR interval. So this is the first PR interval, this second PR interval is increased, third PR interval is increased further, the fourth PR interval results in a loss of generation of QRS complex. So this is progressive increase in PR interval with subsequent loss of QRS. So there is progressive lengthening of PR with subsequent loss of QRS. Then the whole cycle begins again. So coming to Mobitz type 2 or second degree type 2. So this is the ECG for that. So in type 2, the PR interval is normal. PR interval is normal, but not all P wave gives a QRS. PR interval is normal, but not all P waves leads to a generation of QRS complex. As you can see here, this is a P wave leading to a generation of QRS complex. P wave is QRS complex. P wave, this QRS complex. This P wave doesn't lead to generation of QRS complex. So that is Mobitz type 2. So this can be 2:1 block, 3:1 block, which means every second P wave will not lead to a generation of QRS complex. So here this leads, this doesn't lead. This P wave leads to QRS complex, this P wave there's no QRS complex. So this would mean it is a 2:1 block. So 2:1 block implies every alternate P waves lead to a generation of QRS complex. And now coming to the third heart block. So third degree heart block, also known as complete heart block. Here the QRS impulse is generated irrespective of P wave. So the P wave which is generated in SA node, when it goes to AV node, it is completely blocked there. So the QRS which is generated is not dependent on the P wave. So as you can see here, there's a P wave here, but there's no QRS. Then there's a QRS here, again P wave here. So this P wave and QRS, there's no relation between the two. QRS occurs independent of P wave. So that is regarding this heart block. Now before we wind up this class, we'll learn something about a junctional rhythm. So junctional rhythm is junctional rhythm. So in junctional rhythm, so let's look at one ECG with the junctional rhythm. So as you can see in this ECG, this is a P wave, this is a QRS, and this P here, the P wave is getting masked behind QRS. Here there's again P wave, and here P wave, this, and here again there's no P wave preceding this QRS. So in this, the QRS is independent of P wave. So QRS is independent of P wave. So this occurs when the signal generated in SA node is completely blocked in the AV node and doesn't go to the ventricles. So the ventricles is triggered by the intrinsic nature of AV node itself. So the normal junctional rhythm heart rate would be less. So the heart rate would be 40 to 60 beats per minute because it is generated by the AV node. So this becomes important in tachycardia, in ventricular tachycardias. So an accelerated junctional rhythm is when there is junctional rhythm with, so I'll write it down, accelerated junctional rhythm is when there is junctional rhythm with heart rate of 60 to 100, and junctional tachycardia is when there is a junctional rhythm with more than 100 beats. So this becomes important in ventricular tachycardias. So that is about junctional rhythm. And now lastly, a small topic which could be an MCQ, which is what is the ECG change? Is there any ECG change? ECG change in cerebrovascular accident or stroke. Is there any ECG change in cerebrovascular accident? So in some majority of patients with stroke, or subarachnoid hemorrhage, you find something known as T-wave pattern. So what is this T-wave pattern? So this is a primary T-wave inversion. So primary T-wave inversion. So you could see it something like this. So primary T-wave inversion. So a prominent primary T-wave inversion, also known as T-wave pattern, may be seen in some patients with stroke or subarachnoid hemorrhage. So that is it for this video, and in the last video we will discuss only MCQs regarding ECGs, which are important for the examination. Thank you.